I yield back.
Thank you. I'm going to recognize myself for questions. Mr. Straka, you were describing some of the blacklisting that you encountered in your life following these events. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. Do you want me to go back to the statement? Or just
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, where I'd left off, I had said that I'd been permanently banned by PayPal, Venmo, Stripe, Patreon, my donor. And I was in D.C. on January 6th as a private citizen, not on behalf of any of my organizations. Nonetheless, my organization, the Walkaway Foundation, and the Walkaway Campaign PAC, both were permanently banned by PayPal and Stripe and a number of payment processors, as well as donor portals. We were first banned by MailChimp as an email service because it was said that we were using the email service to send and receive emails about planning violence or fundraising for political violence. Constant Contact then banned us, and after that we were banned by 4 more email services, including SendLane and MailerLite.
Let me stop you there.
Sure.
We have developed evidence indicating that Bank of America turned over all of their records regarding anyone who bought a cup of coffee in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. I want to know what your perspective is on that, on the fact that such a large private company would, of their own volition, turn over so much stuff and seemingly violate people's privacy.
Well, I think it's horrifying, and obviously I think that there's an attempt here to try to understand who's funding whom. Certainly there was an interest in who gives to my organization, things like that. I'm personal friends since January 6th with a fellow J6 defendant named Derek Evans, who's running for Congress in West Virginia. A major bank told him that they were canceling his bank mortgage and that he had 30 days to find a new bank to finance his bank mortgage. I mean, while going through the most high-profile criminal case in American history.
Does January 6th open the door to the need for the Congress to look at legal reforms so that we don't see people of any political stripe barred from the financial world by virtue of their nonviolent politics?
I mean, somehow we, the defendants of January 6th, need to be able to have some sort of a voice. I mean, even I am probably one of the most high-profile people who was arrested in conjunction with January 6th. Nonetheless, I felt like it was a David versus Goliath situation. I mean, I could not keep up with the amount of banning and cancellation and I mean payment processors, email services, donor portals. The government put me on a terrorism watch list along with every other J6er. We all have a designation of what's called Quad S. So when we go to the airport now, we have to go through hours of special screening. It's literally TSA told me this is the highest level terrorism list you can be on and still be allowed to fly. They follow you around the airport with teams of agents. Sometimes they have dogs. They station themselves all around you at the gate. They bring special equipment and swab every item in your bag for explosive materials, your hands, your feet, stick their hand down your pants doing pat downs. They do all of this in front of the other passengers multiple times when you're flying. People with misdemeanor charges, misdemeanor disorderly conduct charges.
Well, this is very helpful because during the appropriations process, we can put riders to prohibit the use of funds on some of the things that would seemingly violate people's due process. Mr. Strand, I wanted your advice on a legislative concept I've been talking about with some of my colleagues, and it's on the matter of venue, because we've seen a number of defendants drug into the jurisdiction of Washington, D.C., and then they face a different jury dynamic than they would otherwise face elsewhere in the country. What would be your advice to the Congress about looking at some venue reform to give defendants the ability to face these charges where they're from?
Well, thank you, Congressman, and I couldn't stress the importance of that more. I'm going to take it back from the future and say, right now, I am about to walk in, I'm about to go to prison for almost 3 years. I did nothing wrong. And the only reason that happened, not the only reason, but the main reason it happened so easily is because I was denied the constitutional guarantee of a fair trial by a jury of my peers. Not only that, but my sentence was worsened by a judge who explicitly said from the bench on the record, read the transcript, that he was furious at me for criticizing the government publicly. Specifically, he was furious at me for making the claim, which is my First Amendment protected right to do, but the evidence bears it out, that Washington, D.C. juries are entirely biased, flagrantly so. if I could tell the short story of my experience during my 8-day trial, the most interesting part was day one, which was jury selection. And this was not a random assortment of citizens fulfilling their civic duty to participate in a jury trial. These were people that were hanging on every moment, hoping to get chosen so that they could experience the personal gratification of crucifying someone that they politically despise. They openly admit this.
Very important, that venue issue. Mr. Clark, I have a question for you specifically. Do you believe you were framed by the January 6th Select Committee?
Oh, absolutely, Congressman, I do. I think that, I was the only person at the Justice Department, at a significant level, Senate confirmed spot, who was interested in investigating the election.
Well, I know that to be the case, Mr. Clark, and the reason I know that to be the case, and I'm glad I get to say it here in a public forum, is because I became aware of evidence that U.S. attorneys were developing, showcasing fraud in the election. And perhaps that evidence would lead nowhere, perhaps it would lead to the crime of the century, but it should not have been squelched. And Bill Barr was suppressing evidence and stopping it from being developed that showcased irregularities, and not just irregularities, fraud, where people were fraudulently requesting those ballots. And I told my friend Scott Perry that on the floor, that I was aware of that evidence. And now I believe we see you and we see our colleague Scott Perry unfairly targeted, and I want you and the world to know that if you had a willingness to stop the U.S. Department of Justice from rat-holing cases and squirreling away information that would have been helpful to learn on that day, you were acting your patriotic duty to do so. And I am deeply ashamed as a member of this government, particularly at the way you've been treated. At this time, I'd like to recognize Ms. Green for 5 minutes, and we may ask an accommodation of some of our panelists. Ms. Green has invited a guest here that she would like to question, who may be behind Ms. Perna, so we may have to do a quick musical chairs. Ms. Green, you're recognized.
Yeah, thank you very much. And first of all, I'd like to thank each of you for being here. And that it's so heavy on my heart that we're doing this today when President Trump is being arraigned, all because of the weaponized government that's been weaponized against each of you. And it all started on the day on January 6th when we were just doing our constitutional duty to object to Joe Biden's fraudulent electoral college votes, because we all believed that the election had been stolen. And I can't believe that we're here talking about this, but first I'd like to express my deepest sympathy for each of you and all the pain and suffering that you've all had to go through because of this government, and it's wrong. And I can tell you right now, there's many of us that have vowed we're doing everything we can to defund the Department of Justice, to defund the FBI, and to fight the weaponized government. But I want to explain also the serious situation that we are all in. We have no control over the Department of Justice right now. We have no control over the FBI because we do not control the White House. And that means that everything from January 6 tapes, if they were to get out, and I support releasing them, I've said it all along, but if they do get out, sedition hunters will come. And I know that everybody can look at it and say, we all know who everyone is now, but at the same time, that means that the Department of Justice will be coming after more people. I don't want to see anyone end up like Matthew Perna. I do not want to see anyone end up like Matthew Perna, Jerry. That's too much. I don't want to see anyone end up like you, Brandon. I don't want to see anyone go through what your family's going through. John, I don't want to see you go to jail. I don't want to see it, and I don't want to see this happen to any more people because of sick, evil people that believe that they have to hunt people down using facial recognition software and go after more people. I don't want to see that. It's too much. And I would like to, Taylor Hanson is here today, and if someone would mind letting him sit in. Taylor, could you give just a brief bio about yourself? And I invited Taylor here today because Taylor's an eyewitness and videoed Ashley Babbitt's murder. And I invited him here today because I wanted him to be able to talk about it.
Thank you guys for having me now that the button works. My name is Taylor Hansen. I'm an independent journalist and field reporter. I was there on January 6th to document what I believed was going to be left-wing violence due to the constant pattern of the MAGA Million March and people being violently attacked by left-wing organizations. So, I showed up to the Capitol. I was at the Ellipse, and the next thing I knew, I overheard a group, this is around, I want to say 12:20, talking about, hey, we're going to form a group, we're going to the Capitol early, we're going to march in a few minutes. So I thought that was kind of suspicious, and naturally I just followed them. And this group actually ended up being the very first group to breach the initial barriers. This group had Ray Epps in it, had Ryan Samsel in it, amongst many other people. And after those first initial barriers were actually breached, there was almost, I would say, about 10 to 15 minutes of people just gathering, in this area. And when you're behind, you couldn't even tell what was going on. You're 100 people behind, you can't tell what's going on right in front of you. So there's just this surge of people continuously pushing in. And I'm at the very front, and I can see this. Everybody's being peaceful at this moment. And that's when, as the crowd forms, people are singing the national anthem, people are being patriotic, they're doing their due rights and protesting, doing their First Amendment rights. And
Can
that's
I
when,
pause you for 1 second? Was President Trump still speaking at the Ellipse at this time?
By the time the Capitol was breached, Trump was still speaking, yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. You can continue.
And that's when the first concussion grenade flew over my head and deep into the crowd. And I noticed this hit children that were in the crowd. It hit elderly people. It hit women. And at that moment, the tone completely changed. It was a complete 180. And I've covered, all the 2020 riots. I was on the ground consistently. I have still to this day never seen a reaction of law enforcement like they did that day. I would say that they did start it. That's not a common reoccurrence from what I've seen at these riots or these protests. And that first initial grenade went by, and then it was just a barrage of grenades. I lost count. I had to put people out that were on fire. People had holes in their cheeks from rubber munitions that weren't being violent. They were standing back. And that's when the initial crowd was pushed even farther from the crowd surge. A man named Derek Vargo was pushed off the side of the ledge as he was going up the wall. And that caused almost a stampede of sorts. We went up the stairs. I recall going up the stairs with everybody, and there was these double doors that were wide open, and people were just flowing in. There was 3 cops in sight as I arrived to the top of the Capitol. They were directly to the right of me. I entered in the west wing door, and they were just standing around. They were drinking water, handing out water bottles to people, to protesters, actually. And, I remember going into the Capitol, walking down the hallway. Everybody's chanting, "Stop the steal," no violence yet. I haven't seen pretty much anything. And
Except violence from
violence from the police.
Capitol
And I had
Police.
seen people fighting back, and you did have the occasional person in the crowd with a gas mask that was unidentifiable. I actually have a video of someone that I recognize from my time reporting in Portland, Oregon, that is affiliated with Antifa.
What is his
Antifa
name?
Press. I don't have her identity,
Okay.
But I recognized her, and I said, "Oh, hey, you're from Portland. I recognize you." And this is all on video, and she nods her head and then kind of brushes me off and hurry and runs. And then she's later seen setting up what seems to be a shot of one of her other friends that was there also committing violence against the police.
And let me ask you another. Okay, just a little further. You covered all the Antifa and BLM riots across the country.
Yes, ma'am.
Was Antifa in the crowd that day? And
Absolutely.
could you speak to their involvement? Can we just go a little longer for this?
Yeah,
please?
I mean, they were unequivocally, without a doubt, in the crowd that day. I mean, you have multiple of them that are based in D.C. and Portland that all talked about it on Twitter, about how they were there and nothing is going to happen to them, essentially.
And there's evidence of this.
Yeah, there's evidence of this.
There's
And
video evidence, social media
There's
posts.
social media posts. That's where the majority of them were posted to, was Twitter.
Were you ever questioned by the January 6th committee?
No, I actually reached out multiple occasions, more times than I can count, because I was a witness to what I would argue one of the most significant deaths in American history. I wasn't investigated by MPD, not even interviewed by their homicide team, by the Capitol Police. When the FBI talked to me, they had no interest in what happened to Ashley Babbitt. All they wanted to talk about was John Sullivan and my connection to him, which was, a very peculiar thing, and they tried to set up an in-person meeting with me. And, of course, it wasn't what it was supposed to be. They were trying to entrap me. I had 2 phones hacked and basically completely wiped. And amongst that, I mean, the harassment has just been nonstop.